Hello and welcome to the Unplayable Podcast's instant World Cup recaps. Australia have just clinched another victory in their Super 12s campaign, this time over Ireland in Brisbane. Aaron Finch lost a toss for the first time in what seems like a long time, but maybe it was a blessing in disguise. He cracked 63 off 44 and claimed player of the match honours as Australia got up to 5 for 179. They then bowled out Ireland for 137, even though it could have been a lot less. They were reeling at 5 for 25 with Mitchell Starc getting that new ball swinging. In the end, it was a 42-run victory for Australia, which gives them a little boost in the net run rate, but maybe not as much as they were hoping. I'm Josh Schonafinger, and I'm going to be chatting to Louis Cameron, who's all the way over in Brisbane, and he was there tonight to watch the action. What did you make of tonight's match there, Lou?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. It's nice up here in Brisbane. It's warmed up nicely since I was last here for Australia's warm-up game. What was that, 10 days, 2 weeks ago against India. And yeah, I mean, it was a really funny game in the sense that I reckon both teams walk away from it feeling like it was a missed opportunity. Ireland's captain, Andrew Balbirnie, a lovely guy who I got the chance to speak to yesterday at their training session at Shaw Park in Brisbane's northern suburbs, really spelt out that, he was proud of how they went, but felt like for them it was a missed opportunity in terms of they felt like they could win. They thought they've beaten England and why not knock off the tournament host as well. For Australia, the situation is different. They need to lift their net run rate and get a really big boost. They did get a boost, but not as much as it could have been. They really could have gone into the positives. They could have gone above England, and they missed a chance of doing that. Now, none of that might matter because there is some shocking weather forecast for Brisbane tomorrow, which we might get into, but and that could have some significant implications for this group.
But first we'll get into Australia's innings. As you said, Ireland were well in the game after 13 overs. Australia were 3 for 92, tracking along okay, but that's only 7 runs and over. After that, though, it was Stoinis and Finch who really got the ball rolling. A couple of big overs there, including Mark Adair, who bowled the 15th over of the innings, and it went for 26 runs, with Aaron Finch particularly enjoying himself out there. It's a good turnaround for Finch, who in the last game, looked all at sea really, but managed to be not out, and now he's looking like he's back in form and at the top of the order and leading by example.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, he looked scratchy against Sri Lanka, didn't he? And he admitted himself that, I think he said his words were that his innings was poor against Sri Lanka. And Australia won, with 4 overs to spare despite that. But here it was fluent. I think we have to readjust our expectations for openers just a touch because the new ball is swinging a lot in this tournament. That's been one of the constants. Don't know what it is. I saw a nice stat from CricViz the other day suggesting that T20s in 2022 are getting the most swing of any year in T20 international history, which isn't particularly long, but it does suggest that something a little bit different is happening with this batch of Kookaburra balls potentially, and that the October-November kind of slot in Australia is favouring fast bowlers who can shift the new ball. So that's making life hard for Finch and other openers at the top. It's making life for them difficult. But tonight, he picked his moments really well, didn't he? Like he hit a couple of big sixes. He took his medicine when he needed to, and look, he didn't look any less fluent than a lot of the middle order players. I thought tonight, like it was a slower than normal Gabba wicket. Mitch Marsh said that at the halfway mark. So to get to 180 against a really disciplined Ireland attack, I was really impressed. Disciplined in the sense that there's no doubt that they're not as skillful as some of their more credentialed opponents, but they had really good plans. You could see the strategy is at the same level as these top nations. Some of the fields I was setting I thought were really interesting. That's real cricket enough territory, Josh, so we don't have to go into that if you don't want to. But and they've got some borderline world-class bowlers in Josh Little, who I haven't seen much of, and he really impressed me tonight. And their leg spinner Gareth Delaney as well, I thought was really good. I think he only ended up bowling 3 overs. So, that might have been a bit of a trick missed. But, so Finch did really well. And just the last point on that, he spoke quite interestingly yesterday in his pre-match press conference about, with no Steve Smith in this team, him and Warner are basically having to kind of pivot to the anchor role in inverted commas, and Warner hasn't really fired so far this tournament. Finch has definitely been struggling with his form, in the Sri Lanka game at least. So he's playing a maybe slightly more conservative role than what he normally does. So there's a few things swirling around there. But the biggest talking point, sorry, I said the last bit was the last bit, but this bit is the last bit on this, mate. Finch has hurt himself, and he's going for scans tomorrow, and I just get the sense that injury might be, it could have some impact on him finishing the tournament.
Okay, yeah, quite a few things to talk about there. I'll just quickly touch on the Irish bowlers, who were pretty good across the board, as you mentioned. Josh Little, 2 for 21 off his 4 overs. Barry McCarthy, who was pulled off an amazing 6-saver down at Long On, took 3 wickets himself. And I also thought...
Bazamaka to his mates, Josh. Bazamaka.
Okay, Bazamaka, yes. If he was Aussie, that would definitely be what he would known as. Gareth Delaney was good, as you said, no wickets for 29. And George Dockrell, who has been doing it for what seems like ever in the county stuff, none for 24 off his 4 overs. Pretty impressive return from him. But as you mentioned, the injuries were stacking up at the end of that match. Matthew Wade was out there marshalling the troops as vice-captain with Finch off the field, and we also saw Tim David off the field, and we also saw one other off the field, didn't we, at the end there?
Marcus Stoinis, who just had it confirmed. He also had a hamstring injury. So 3 times hamstring injuries. Maybe not alarm bells, but and especially with the caveat that Tim David, in inverted commas, was managing soreness. Stoinis apparently the same. The Finch one sounded like a twinge or he's pulled something, and he has a history. He's a bit older than those guys, and he has a history of hamstring injuries. So that's probably the one we're most worried about. But Stoinis, has been hurt quite a bit in the past. David, we don't know quite as much about because he's younger and just hasn't been around the Aussie setup. So, some real concerns around what they're going to have to do throwing the captaincy to probably Matthew Wade for the business end of the tournament if they make the semi-finals.
And they can't really afford to take their foot off the pedal too much. So they've got Afghanistan in Adelaide in their last match, but as we've touched on, their net run rate is still below England. And if there is play tomorrow in Brisbane, then it could really come down to that. So how do you think that's going to play out? Does Steve Smith come in, or do they try and push through with these, obviously the preferred 11, do they push through with these niggly injuries?
Yeah, to spell it out, if England lose or if that game against New Zealand gets washed out, Australia are through, I believe, as whether they beat Afghanistan or not, or maybe they do need to beat Afghanistan.
I think they would need to beat them, but just net run rate wouldn't be a factor.
Sorry, yes, yeah, that's right. I got a bit jumbled in my thoughts. All these net run rate, they do my head in, honestly.
I can see the gears ticking over, mate.
Oh, mate, yeah. So Australia need to beat Afghanistan first and foremost, and then the England-New Zealand game will be crucial, as to how much they need to beat them by. At this point, a 36-run win over Afghanistan would lift them above England's net run rate. Now, that figure doesn't really matter too much because A, it presumes that they bat first, and B, presumes England's net run rate doesn't change. And if it doesn't change, it means they've been washed out, and then the net run rate wouldn't matter anyway. So I don't even know why I mentioned it. But there's a lot of things swirling around at the moment. Who'd want to be captain? Who'd want to be coach? Who'd want to be a journalist reporting on it and trying to figure it all out? I'm just got to leave it to smarter people, I suppose.
As I mentioned at the top, Ireland were in a lot of trouble in the power play. They were 5 for 25. Glenn Maxwell bowled the 3rd over and took 2 wickets, 2 pretty soft wickets to be fair, but you got to take them, and they were big wickets too, that of Paul Sterling and Harry Tector, who's been in excellent form in the one-day side. And then Mitchell Starc got that new Kookaburra swinging Curtis Camphor and George Dockrell bowled with 2 in-swinging beauties. If you haven't seen them, they are on cricket.com.au, so check them out. Do you reckon these new Kookaburras are swinging more this year? Is that what you said earlier?
That was a suggestion that I've heard. Maybe I need to dig into this a little bit more, that there was something about a new batch of kookaburras and they're just doing something different, That was something, yeah. I mean, I saw the stat that, if CricViz is the gospel of cricket, right? So we can't question them. They say more swing has been gotten in this 2022 than any other year in T20 international cricket. So that's something, and maybe we need to speak to Kookaburra about what's going on with the balls. Are they loading up one side of the ball? Are they using a new lacquer? I'm not sure what it could be, but it's good news for Mitchell Starc, even though he's not taking the new ball. He's got a new role with the ball. He's bowling more through the middle, and it seems to be working out for him. Although I'm not entirely convinced that he doesn't want the new ball, but that might be a different matter.
Well, there might be something in that, because just from the eye test, I mean, Australian bowlers especially, just after that first or second over in one days or T20s, just haven't got the swing in the last 10 years. So who knows, maybe there is something in that. Lorcan Tucker was the standout for Ireland, and in the face of absolute calamity, he stood up and took the Aussies on. He finished with 71 not out of 48 deliveries. It just ran out of partners in the end. And maybe had Irish fans hoping for a miracle there, but yeah, in the face of what was almost a calamity, it was a pretty impressive knock from the young fella, wasn't it?
It was incredible. And you just wonder whether if they'd been able to stymie that collapse to maybe 3 for 25 instead of 5 for 25, or they'd just gotten a little bit out of their middle order. If Tucker plays the same innings, then maybe he's chasing, those same 30 or 40 runs off the last 2 or 3 overs, with another batter down the other end. I mean, it was tragic in the end that they took a single off the last ball of the third to last over, I think it was, when Josh Little was in, and then there was a run out on the very next ball. So they just needed to get Tucker on strike, and even if it means one fewer run, Tucker's got to be facing the majority of balls in those last 2 overs. So that's something they'll learn from. I'm loath to criticise my man Josh Little. I thought he was fantastic. He might be the new Ruben Trumpelman, who was mysteriously absent from Namibia's earlier qualifying stage.
There's another storyline to dig deeper into, I reckon.
Josh Little, yeah. Oh, the Ruben Trumpelman absence, yeah. Who's abducted him? What's going on with him? We need to know. But Josh Little, Big Bash teams, I hope they're watching, because he'd be a real asset as a potential replacement overseas player for a fast bowler. I know Ireland have a tour in January of Zimbabwe, I think it is, or Zimbabwe might be going to Ireland, which wouldn't be ideal. And given half the competition of Big Bash overseas players are leaving, then they might not want another one like that. But surely he's on some overseas T20 radars, and he's already done well in the 100.
Definitely. And if you perform well against England like he did a couple of days ago, that's got to keep you in the good books. Now, Louis, are you going to be hanging around in Brisbane for tomorrow's New Zealand-England match, or are you straight over to Adelaide for the Afghanistan-Australia match?
Neither, mate, neither. I'm on a 10:20 flight back to Melbourne. I'm handing over to our esteemed colleague Andrew Ramsey for Australia's game against Afghanistan. So hold the line, because we might be able to con Andrew into an Unplayable podcast stint. So watch this space. It'd be nice to get him on board after that Afghanistan game. If not, then it might just be us two, Josh. Haven't worked it out that far.
Okay, lots still to play out as it is in this World Cup. Now, just like a couple of days ago, I asked our listeners on Instagram and Twitter what their highlight of the T20 World Cup so far has been. A lot of people said Kohli's innings. A lot of people also said the Pac Bean drama, which was big on Twitter, and maybe our Instagram listeners wouldn't have seen that, but that was a massive moment in the Zimbabwe-Pakistan match, wasn't it?
That was the most bizarre controversy that I've ever heard about in cricket. I mean, what's going on? I mean, to hold a nation responsible for an impersonator who I'm not quite sure was actually ever saying that he was the real Mr. Bean in the first place. So some of these Zimbabweans who attended the agriculture show in the first place need to have a good hard look at themselves, Josh, because, look, that's clearly not Mr. Bean. It's just a lookalike comedian trying to earn an honest living. And look, but I'm glad that the feelings run deep, and I'm glad that Zimbabwean cricket, A, that they're strong enough, and B, they're playing a team like Pakistan regularly enough to build up a rivalry. It's what we need. So having said all that, it's good for the game. Mr. Bean, Pac Bean is what we need more of.
I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you, Louis, for your time. We'll chat to you very shortly, hopefully in the semi-finals at one point, and on to the next episode of the Unplayable Podcast.
Look forward to it, Josh.